Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Freedom Factor. We're going to discuss the elephant in the room today. I know everybody's been talking about it, and it does bear needing to be talking about. So, what am I talking about? Epstein, obviously. So, um, we've seen the Epstein file drop, and this whole ordeal has been just really big black mark for the Trump administration. It really makes it like a lot of egg on their face, and I'm going to discuss some of that. So, first of all, there's some crazy stuff about Epstein and his background, having worked for um, Bear Stearns, and he worked at the Dalton School when he was appointed by Bill Barr's father to be a teacher there. I mean, just crazy stuff with his history. And I invite anyone to go look at Daryl Cooper's Martyr Made podcast. He does a 5 hour long form kind of delve into Jeffrey Epstein. But so I personally have not gone through a lot of the documents. I've seen a lot of the documents. I've seen a lot of the emails and the files, and others have done that in greater detail and more depth than I have. And so I'm basing it a lot on what others have revealed. But the good news is that they cite their sources, and you can actually go and see the files from the DOJ website, even though it's not organized in a really good way. So I do have to give kudos. This is huge. Ian Carroll, who, if you're not familiar with, he kind of pens himself as a journalist. I would say he is. He's that new wave of independent journalism that we're seeing nowadays. That's not like, that's free from the constraints of the corporate media background. The CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all that. So really, the landscape of journalism has gotten so expansive into this new realm where independent journalists are becoming the future and are presenting information that is not through a filter. I know that a lot of people watch like CNN and Fox News and stuff, and those are falling by the wayside especially with the younger generation. Like my generation, people in their 40s and 30s. So it's really getting to that point where the old paradigm is going away. It's shifting, and now we're into this new age, where you've got Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball with breaking points. You've got these different shows. You got even Piers Morgan Uncensored, which he does an excellent job. But really, this deep dive kind of stuff really comes down to the people doing this stuff, such as the Scott Hortons and the Daryl Coopers and Ian Carroll, and I would even say the commentary on it, really, really poignant and relevant, are people like Clint Russell and Dave Smith and Rob Bernstein, who are really just giving this commentary that you're not going to find from these, this old system like Fox News. Growing up, my parents watched a lot of Fox News, and it worked on this system where you don't get long form discussion. You don't get a deep dive. Not like Ian Carroll did a multi-hour live stream the other night where he unveiled, and this is huge. This is massive. He unveiled this application that he and a group of his friends came up with called Web, and I invite you to go check out his show. Do check it out on Kick, because it goes into further detail than what YouTube does, and you can view his previous streams. It was really good. He broke down Web and how it works. It's basically using a LLM, a large language model, what we consider like AI. Kind of like ChatGPT, but this is way more advanced. You have to pay for these models to utilize, but they uploaded all of the files from the latest Epstein file dump that were released by the DOJ. They uploaded everything into this system, scanned it all. They said there were a lot of duplicates, which, having worked in government before, I understand there are going to be duplicates, but this whole system just basically allows you to an interface like ChatGPT or Grok, where you can ask it questions about certain things, and even use plain layman's terms. You don't have to be all like, regimented like Boolean logic, like you're searching on an academic, scholarly journal site. And you can ask it questions like, what government did it appear that Jeffrey Epstein was working for? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tiny hat gang. So, you know, all of this stuff. So Ian Carroll did he revealed a lot of stuff. I mean, he went through some of the stuff previously, I think it was a couple days ago, and found some pretty crazy stuff within these documents. And then going through web, so he's offering it to content creators and journalists to kind of, I guess you could say, beta test almost. And then he's going to open it up to the public for beta testing, and then completely open it up. And it will cost money, because these AI models do cost money, and he's been fronting a lot. So I think a lot of kudos need to be given to Ian Carroll, because he is putting really his own money into this and using his money to allow other journalists and content creators to be able to basically delve into these documents in depth and kind of develop patterns and evidence and kind of get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. Because honestly, this is huge. This is probably the biggest, I would say one of the biggest, I don't even know what it's not a controversy, it's not a scandal, it is what's going on behind the scenes of really world geopolitics. I mean, you've got this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, from all the documents from what we've gathered, he's had connections to people, like high-ranking people all over. And there's, suspicion of money laundering and defense contract spending. There's some documents I saw that he was dealing with trying to get people into Israel from Russia, and then they're trying to deflect. This is where things are getting really ridiculous. We're not falling for this again. They're trying to say he was a Russian asset or a Russian agent or a Russian spy or something, when it's like, then why was he working with Russian officials to try to get people into Israel when he could just do that if he was a Russian agent? There's a lot of holes in that whole theory, and it's them trying to deflect away from our greatest ally. I mean, it's clear. He had this really close personal relationship with the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, where Ehud Barak stayed at his house multiple times, and he's had this multi-year kind of relationship with him. And mind you, Ehud Barak wasn't just the former Prime Minister of Israel. He was also the chief of their military intelligence division. So he's got these connections. And of course, there's, a couple of emails where there was mention of Mossad, and how Ehud was asking, are you saying don't say you're Mossad or me? And he goes, both. And it's just, all this stuff is crazy. And I invite you to dig deep into this stuff, because there's so much. It's insane. So I want to start out with what's going on. Like, first of all, this whole thing, the implication on this is, and I don't know for sure. I haven't done, and I would love if Ian Carroll ever knows my name, knows of my channel, I would love to have access to web during his, initial journalism delve into. Maybe today I'll send him a private message, but I would love to delve into web just to figure out for myself what the implications for Donald Trump are. And I know there's a lot of people who are champing at the bit trying to figure out if Donald Trump was a client of Epstein's more salacious activities, with, I'm trying to be careful with my words for YouTube here, with the, I guess you'd say, the underage aspect, which I'm making I have no preconceived notions. I'm making no presuppositions as to Trump's connection to any of that, because I flat out don't know, and I'm not going to lean one way or the other. I'm just going off of what the evidence shows, and it would not be surprising if that were the case, because we all know Donald Trump has had extramarital affairs. I mean, he had an affair. He cheated on his wife. Um, he had an affair with Stormy Daniels. That has never been disputed. And he ran beauty pageants, and there's allegations that he, you know, while they were changing, he came in, and we're talking about underage children here, girls. And so his kind of, I guess you could say, reputation there. But there's also, you have to consider the fact that he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. He banned him from Mar-a-Lago. And the accusation was that Epstein had made some kind of inappropriate advances towards a member's daughter who was young. So I don't know how much credibility to give to either side of the argument. Um, I'll just kind of allow that to be fleshed out with this stuff. And we all know the truth. We all know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter who is incriminated by all of this. It doesn't matter the implications. We all know nothing is really going to happen as a result of this, as much as we would like to. And there's a lot of talk that people like Rokana and Thomas Massey are the heroes of all this. But another member of our government that I think really deserves some credit is Tim Burchett. He said, I think there should be prosecutions. They should be hanged, and I agree 100% with that. It doesn't matter what political aisle they sit on. This implicates people on both sides. You've got people like Alan Dershowitz, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton. We all are aware Bill Clinton has had a extensive relationship with Epstein. And there's a bunch of people. Howard Lutnick is a really bizarre one that came up, because Howard came out and said he and his wife went to Epstein's house. I guess they lived like in the same neighborhood or something. That's what it appeared to be from his interview that he did. I don't know how long ago. But in this interview, he clearly says, we went into his house. There was a massage table, and I asked Jeffrey about the massage table, and he says, "Oh, I get massages every day. The good kind, wink, wink, nudge, nudge." And then he said that was the last interaction they had with him because he found him to be a disgusting person. But then from the Epstein file, there's emails from Howard Lutnick to Jeffrey Epstein detailing wanting to visit Little St. James Island. And he gives, this is the weird part, he gives the ages of his children. I'm like, I don't do that with, if I'm getting ready to go somewhere into the Caribbean with my family, I'm not going to give the ages of everybody in the party. That's just weird. Unless it's like something, not unsolicited. If it's like, I do a lot of cruising. So anytime we go on a cruise, sometimes there are activities or excursions or something on some of these islands that they are age limited. Kids have to be over 12 or 18 or 16, what have you. And, you have to delineate what age your children are. And so that's completely unrelated to this. This is a guy who owns an island in the Caribbean, and you're telling him the ages of your kids for what reason, unsolicited? It's just weird. And so he's basically caught in a lie, saying I had no other further involvement with Epstein, when that's a lie. Yes, you did. We have the evidentiary proof. Years later, you're emailing Epstein about visiting his island. So there are a lot of implications on this. And I think really the chips need to fall where they may. And I really applaud Thomas Massey. I guess the latest, yesterday he went and, or the day before yesterday, I can't remember. I don't know which day, but Massey went to the DOJ to view the files. And I guess he said some of the files were given to the DOJ already redacted, which is really interesting because then you want to know where the sourcing for that is. Was that submitted from the FBI to the DOJ? Was that submitted from some other law enforcement entity to the DOJ? Why were they redacted? Why were they given the files already pre-redacted? But also, I think in the interest of transparency and from the actual bill passed, that Thomas Massey got through, which he's a hero for doing. The bill that got through, I believe one of the stipulations was the files were to be released unredacted, unless it contained national security or victim information as part of victim confidentiality, because we don't want to victims who don't want to be named publicly. I think we should respect their privacy in that. However, they can't just say, Pam Bondi cannot just say, oh, well, it names this high government official, and in the interest of national security, we need to redact their names. That is a lie, and we should not allow for that. No, I don't care if it's, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia or the current Prime Minister of Israel or the President of the United States. If they're implicated of wrongdoing in these files, their name needs to be known. And that is in the interest of transparency and justice. And those are two cornerstones of American civilization that we need to be harping on and we need to hold on to. That's why this whole thing this looks so bad for the Trump administration, because remember, we had Pam Bondi say, I've got the files on my desk, and the whole binders to the influencers little dog and pony show was complete bullcrap. And nobody believes that. She was giving them empty binders and said I've got the list on my desk and blah blah blah. And then Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are there's no there there. They're claiming that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked children to themselves and nobody else. Anybody who believes that, seriously, I got some really great beachfront property in Kansas. I'll sell you cheap if you believe that. Come on. Nobody is falling for this shit. And the fact that they're trying to gaslight us into thinking that this is not as big of a deal as it is, when there is so many just damning implications here. There's, trafficking, there's illicit activity. I haven't really delve too deep into this, but Ian Carroll kind of pointed out the other day with all this that Jeffrey Epstein may have had a hand in the 2008 financial crisis because of funds that he had invested with Bear Stearns. And, Bear Stearns was one of the banks that was bailed out. JP Morgan, all this stuff. So it's there are huge implications from this, and this is so broad and far-reaching, and Donald Trump would like nothing more than us to move on. And it's no, dude, we're not moving on. This is bigger than Watergate. This is bigger than the JFK assassination. This is bigger than Iran-Contra. This is probably one of the biggest, I guess you could say, kerfuffle. I don't even know the words to say. This is a huge ordeal that implicates people on a global scale. I mean, we've had people from foreign governments resign over their involvement with the Epstein files. We've had U.S. diplomats and foreign dignitaries implicated in this. And I'm not even getting into the weird references to food. This has been brought up a couple of times. It kind of lends a little bit of credence to the whole Pizzagate controversy, because in a lot of the emails, there's references to pizza and grape soda, which I'm a pretty big fan of, various brands of pizza, from Papa John's to Bojo's, which is a local one here in Colorado. And, I've never paired pizza with grape soda. I've never heard of anybody pairing pizza with grape soda. So that one's kind of weird. And so, if you remember the big controversy years ago about the Pizzagate scandal that involved John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, they were doing this gaslighting kind of campaign where the media had latched onto this as this is the conspiracy theory du jour, and it's all this wild and crazy conspiracy theory that implicated Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C., where they were saying, hey, I really liked that pizza last night, wink, wink, and the I guess it was like thousands of dollars in hot dogs ordered, and like all these references to pizza where it was very weird coded language in John Podesta's emails that basically said like, all these coded words with when reference to pizza, which I don't know anybody who eats that much pizza unless you're a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, is pizza a code word for trafficking, minors and stuff?" And and it kind of the media kind of tried to spin it into this weird conspiracy theory where eventually it led to some psycho going to this pizzeria in DC and shooting into it. Luckily, no one was hurt. But it was like, see, it's just a crazy, kooky conspiracy theory. And it's like, no, we weren't, like, look at John Podesta. He had some really freaking weird, artwork in his home that was depicting children being tortured. And he has all these connections to Marina Abramovich and all this, like weird spirit cooking, and it's just some really bizarre, almost satanic stuff going on. And now we're getting a little bit of vindication from the Epstein files because there's a lot of references to pizza. And then there's the added one of all these references to jerky. And and again, I'm pointing back to Ian Carroll because he did a great job of pointing this out and detailing this. There's a lot of like references to beef jerky that Epstein makes, and yet there is almost no evidence, and I've done searches on this. There's almost no evidence of Jeffrey Epstein ever being in possession or eating beef jerky at all. There's no photographic evidence. There's no, and some of the stuff that is said in reference to jerky at like the quantities where it's in very bizarre quantities and it's being talked about like it's this delicacy. Guys, it's beef jerky. You can pick it up at a gas station for a couple bucks. So something tells me they're not talking about the food. This is some sort of, coded language. And a lot of people have latched on to it's, they're eating, they're cannibals kind of thing. And I really do like the analysis that Ian Carroll put out with it, that he thinks it's kind of like a more broad-based thing. Like a lot of people are saying it's their body parts or blood of children or something, and then other people are saying it's adrenochrome, which is another rabbit hole that Jim Caviezel has talked about, which I think goes a little bit kind of far into the realm of a little crazy. But I do think Ian is right in his analysis that it's just kind of more general to anything relating to that, and that they maybe they have some like development of like something to do with extending your life and kind of staying young and virile, because there is some weird stuff in relation to Diddy where someone kind of pointed this out the other day. I can't remember where I saw it, but like they were saying like, look at Diddy in the late 90s to now and how he looks relatively the same, but then he goes to jail and now he's looking disheveled and gray and just kind of like he's aging, like almost like I made the comparison that it's almost like, look at George W. Bush in 2000 when he was elected president, and then look at him in 2008 when he left the White House, how much he aged. Or even Barack Obama. Barack Obama in 2008 was this young-looking, senator from Illinois, and then when he gets done in 2016 and leaves office, he looks like he is aged like 50 years because the presidency ages you. Unless you're Donald Trump, somehow he didn't really age much. after his first term. His first 4 years, he didn't look that much older. But so anyway, this is very curious. I don't want to like latch on to these conspiracy theories though and delve into it because again there's not enough information there. But it is very weird. The talk of jerky is weird, and it's not enough to draw an inference that something untoward is going on, but it is enough to ask questions. And that's the other thing. I wanted to bring this up. A lot of people are latching onto some of these documents, especially early on when we first got the documents. A lot of people were seeing like witness statements or reporting from from like I guess the FBI has a lot of reporting, and some of these were like witness statements from people at like different places and what they said. And you have to be careful with some of those because a lot of those witness statements they're not evidence. They're not high value in the evidentiary scale. Having worked in military intelligence, I know oxymoron, I've heard the jokes, but having worked in military intelligence, sourcing is a huge factor in that, and you have to determine the proximity of the source to the information as well as the legitimacy of the source themselves. A lot of sources are not reliable, and they have like a scale of reliability, and we base it off of a lot of historical stuff. Has this source been reliable in the past? Can you corroborate with other sources the information that you're obtaining? And one of the reports that I had read, and I'm not going to go digging through to find it, otherwise I'd put it up on screen for you to see, but one of the sources was talking about one of the golf courses in California that Donald Trump owns, and they're saying how in 1996 something happened, it involved Donald Trump and all this, and then you look into it and you're like, well, Trump didn't purchase that property until like the early 2000s and didn't open until like 2006. So it's like, how did this happen at Donald Trump's golf course in 1996 when Donald Trump didn't own the golf course in 1996? So there's a lot of that in there that you have to be really careful of, because a lot of these witness statements are not verifiable, they're not legitimate, and they're really not they don't really have a whole lot of accuracy to them, because again, a witness can say anything. And having worked in law enforcement, I've dealt with witnesses who have been untruthful. I mean, just flat out, like they're not reliable, they're not credible, and you have to judge the credibility of the witness. And so a witness statement alone on the face is not evidentiary, is not great evidentiary value. It kind of leads into things, and depending on what's been investigated, what follows up with that, yes, we should definitely look into. But again, a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of emails, and the other part that's kind of weird is this whole email that Jeffrey Epstein sent to himself concerning Bill and Melinda Gates, where Bill Gates had apparently gotten an STD from assuming a Russian girl, that's what the information shows, and then gave it to his wife Melinda, and then kind of tried to slip her the treatment drugs for that STD. That was an email generated and sent to himself by Jeffrey Epstein, and it's not like the most, I guess, credible information, I would say, but it's kind of one of those things that's like it's a string to pull on. And the weird part about it is really Bill and Melinda's reaction. Bill Gates kind of didn't outright say like that's preposterous and absurd, which is really weird. He's like, oh yeah, Jeffrey sent that email to himself, why did you do that? And it's like, well, you need to give us, like, where's the outright denial? And Melinda saying some weird stuff like, oh, this is terrible and awful and all that. So the whole thing is really weird. But the big issue here we need to look at is just how bad this looks for the Trump administration, where Trump was saying this is a big Democrat hoax, when it's like, not really. Your boy Howard Lutnick was implicated in a lot of this stuff. And, as a lot of independent journalists and people have kind of pointed out in the past and currently, it's like you really do need to kind of like wonder where this all leads into, because there is some really interesting stuff coming out of this, and they're trying to deflect and distract. And that's kind of the scary part about this, is we're not going to let this go, and we shouldn't let this go. The fact of the matter is, Dan Bongino, before becoming the deputy director of the FBI, he was like, don't let this go. We got to stay on top of this. We got to keep pursuing this. And it's like, he gets in, and we're like, come on, Dan and Cash, you guys need to crack this whole thing wide open. And they're like, there's no there. And it was like, they got to him. And the implications here are that it goes higher. It goes into this whole supposed deep state, where people are starting to kind of realize that a lot of the powerful people in various forms of government are into this. They're implicated, and they're trying to cover it up, and they're trying to hide it. And the whole thing just cracked wide open thanks to Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, that there's this cabal that is deeply tied into everything, and was doing all of this nefarious and disgusting and depraved stuff, and no justice is going to come from it unless we demand it. And we've got to keep on it and keep demanding it, because at the end of the day, like, this is huge. This is our government. This is who runs the world. And it's like, there's so much to dig into. I mean, there's so much. Like, Ghislaine Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment with the whole thing. The committee is going to depose Bill and Hillary Clinton. And the weird part is, they want it to be public, but Comer wants it to be not public, which is really bizarre. I think that's kind of crazy. And there's been a lot of hints by Ghislaine about, like, she's willing to speak on some of these things if she's granted clemency. If Trump kind of pardons her or grants her immunity, that she'll spill it. Look, I'm not buying a single word that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel said with Epstein killed himself. I am not buying that. I do not think that that's what happened. I think he was straight up taken out because of what he knew, and he had outlived his purposes, and they could not cover any more for him. Remember the sweetheart deal back in 2006 that Alex Acosta gave him? And people still dealt with him thereafter a lot. Like, a lot of this stuff goes into 2018. Like, through that, like 2011, there's a lot of emails, in 2014 and stuff, before Epstein was finally arrested, and his whole mysterious circumstances of dying while in custody because guards fell asleep and cameras somehow malfunctioned. Having worked in corrections before, you fall asleep, you're fired. That's not something that, corrections guards do. You don't fall asleep, especially if you're in a high profile segregated housing unit like where Epstein was. And cameras don't just go on the fritz conveniently right when you have an in custody death. That is not how that works at all. And this is like, we're talking about high-tech systems here. And so I'm not believing any of the stuff that they're saying. And so I think the whole thing was the beans were starting to get spilled, and they were afraid that Epstein was going to talk, so they got rid of him. And I think Ghislaine Maxwell is trying her best to get protected before she says anything, because she's probably going to see the same fate if she starts yapping. And she knows a lot. And the weird part is, I'd love to delve into this, and this is where I guess Ian Carroll's web program would be really useful, is that whole weird connection between Ghislaine Maxwell and Melania. That one, like I've heard that there's some emails where they talk kind of gal pal, which is really weird. So there's a lot that still needs to be dug into, and I would love to see more information on this be revealed. But really, it's like, this is not something that's going to go away. And, for everybody talking about how much of a big deal this was, like Donald Trump and Dan Bongino, and then all of a sudden they get into power and they want to try and sweep it under the rug and say, let's move on, is really suspicious. And it really doesn't look good for them. And I really think we need to push them. I mean, my personal opinion on all of the Epstein stuff is they should re-release everything unredacted, with the exception I outlined earlier, national security and victims. Everything unredacted, name all the names, put all the people into the sunlight, and let the chips fall where they may. A lot of people are saying if this could collapse governments. If that's the case, that's absolutely what should happen then. We can't have these people running governments while engaging in this kind of activity. I mean, even if it's bare bones, all it is them abusing minors, that alone right there is bad enough. Never mind all the weird conspiracy that, feeding stuff or whatever the jerky code words mean. Just the trafficking and abuse of minors, I think, is more than enough to have all of these people face justice, like severe, permanent, vicious justice. They need to be held to account. And if it implies that half of our government is indicted, good. If it ruins relationships with certain foreign governments, then so be it. We don't want to be run by evil people who are doing these evil things to children. Pure and simple. And so I think all of this needs to be brought out into the sunlight, because really sunlight is the best, decontaminant. Let it all go into the sunlight and let the chips fall where they may. So I know there's going to be a lot more coming out from this. I am going to try and reach out to Ian Carroll and see if I can try and get access to web, because I think that would be amazing. I can do some checking myself and get in on it and look into this. But thanks for tuning in. I want, if you've got thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. It'd be interesting to see other people's, perspective on this. I really do. This should be the uniting thing for Americans. There's, everybody's like, really, we need to look into, there's this cabal of pedophiles, pretty much in powerful positions all over the world, in finance and government, in defense. And it should be something that unites us against this stuff, not this left versus right, but good versus evil. And yet people are still harping on the halftime show. Like, there's bigger things. Don't let these distractions get in the way of seeking out the truth and figuring out, who the bad people really are and bringing them to justice. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.